let's put on presentation. That one. Okay. So hopefully you can see my screen. You can see topics for 10 weeks, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, welcome back, everyone. Pretty much everyone was very good, did their homework. One or two sinners didn't do their homework, left it to the last minute, which is exactly what I would have done. But anyway, I was impressed. Some people, were very motivated. They got it done right after the lesson. Yeah. Like I say, well, actually, I'm about to start having Kurzarbeit, so Thursdays and Fridays I probably won't be here. But if you need time, if you're struggling, we can connect on Hangouts, and I can help you with what you're struggling with. And otherwise, I think most people seem to do pretty okay with the challenges so far. So, are you ready for some more?
Yeah.
Deep silence.
Yes.
Hell yes.
Hell yes. That's what we need.
Deep muted microphone.
Exactly.
I was screaming, but the mic was muted, so sorry.
Bring it on.
Okay. So this time we're into. So last time we did an intro. Today we're actually going to do the crash course in JavaScript, and that's what I've prepared for us today. So basically, our goals today is I want to teach you guys. Hi Adela. I want to teach you guys the minimum viable JavaScript. That's a term that I just invented. But what that means is, I'm not going to teach you all JavaScript. That's would take too long. But what I'm going to teach you is the things that you probably use quite often as you're writing Google Apps scripts, and just enough to get you started, so you can begin exploring. In the classroom, you'll find that I've put a bunch of resources, and I'd recommend if after this lesson, especially if you're still confused, have a look at some of these. One of these is actually a full course on JavaScript. It will take some time, but this goes pretty in depth into everything that about the language, and there are some. Depends. That's more of an interactive course. There are others. I like this one. This website W3 Schools is a nice kind of easy walkthrough, worth having a look. But hopefully by the end of today, you'll be given a serious boost and be feeling like you could give things a try. So those are the topics we're going to cover today: variables, conditional logic, arrays, loops, objects, and functions. We're going to identify a few best practices along the way, and by best practices I mean to help you write code that doesn't drive yourself or anyone else insane. And so by the end of this, I'm hoping you feel like, yeah, okay, I could kind of try writing my own code now. Okay, so are you ready? Okay. I'll assume everyone was on mute.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. We're going to pretend we're Americans. We're psyched to do some programming. Okay. All right. So the first thing we're going to start with is variables. Now, maybe just to step back for a second. So I'm going to try and keep the examples I give you relevant to what we're doing. Carry on with the kind of example we started last time. I do need to explain a few things in an abstract sense, but I hope I can then demonstrate them by example. All right, so a variable allows your program to remember things while it's running. Okay, and this is how variables tend to look. So you start by having a variable declaration like var, you give it a name, and then you give it a value. So it's you say, I'm about to declare a variable, here's its name, here's its value. Now, as a metaphor, you can think of this as like, it's like a box, and on the side of the box is the name of the box, like email address. And in the box, you put values. Okay, so that's basically what a variable is. So let me give you a quick demo of what variables look like, and I'll do this in the code editor. So this week I'll share this with you. I've extended the spreadsheet a little more. I've got a couple of extra columns, and then there's this little experiment sheet for a challenge at the end. So as usual, we go into Tools, Script Editor. I'll do it again now. And here I am in the script editor. And then let's write a function. I'm going to type really fast. Do you see the speed of that typing? Okay, no one got the joke there. But
I think everybody is on mute.
We're all
oh, okay.
so.
You're all laughing on the inside. So so here we have a variable called email address, and I've given it a value of my email address. Then I'm going to log the value. So I say basically log the variable email address, and what it does is it will show the value. And then here what we're doing is I'm getting a specific value out of the spreadsheet from cell B9. So let's see who's in B9. It's Martina. So and here I can reassign. I can put a new value in the box from the cell B9 and log that as well. So let's see what happens if I run this. So I go to, oops, I just have to save it. So there's my function. I've called it variables, and I hit run, and it's running the function. Okay, and let's see what the result is. There you go. So first of all, it logged my email address, and then after I pulled the value out of the spreadsheet, it logs that. So a variable, and then when the program stops running, this variable is thrown away. So it only is remembered by the program for as long as the program is running. Okay? So that's a variable. I'll paste this into here just so you have a copy of these things we did. Okay, all clear so far?
Yeah, maybe it makes sense to explain also why we need to declare variables to sort of reduce the memory.
Yeah, well, I've avoided that at the moment. I would say the one thing is because it gets into a tricky discussion of something known as scope. Yeah, I think I'm gonna. Yeah, I'm gonna delay that for another lesson because right now we need to. At the end of this lesson, we'll cover functions, and before I can really explain it to you, I need to show you how functions work. So the basic point is if you're going to have a variable, if you're going to use a variable, declare it once with var. That's just something I would say remember right now. The reason why you need to do that takes a bit more explaining, and I think if I do that for you guys right now, it's going to overload. Okay? All right, so just a couple of points here on variables. So let me just, by the way, if ever the text on the screen is too small, just say so, and I'll increase the size. All right. So one thing is when you're declaring variables, use descriptive names. So calling it email address makes it readable. Calling it E is not going to be readable for very long. The other thing is more of a convention. Basically, most people in JavaScript use what's called the so-called Camelcase convention for writing variable names. And that means that the first letter of a variable name is lowercase. And then the words, if you have multiple words, you have like email address, number of users, last contact date. This is the Camelcase style of variable names. Now, why am I stressing that right now? If you may think that seems like a kind of a trivial thing to be pointing out, but I'd say it's one thing to take away here is that if you keep your code readable, it will make it a lot easier to find bugs, or you work on it and then a month goes by and you don't touch it, then you come back and you're trying to remember what you did. Trying to make code that is readable to the eye is worth doing. And so like using good variable names and being consistent makes it easier for your eye when you're looking over code to understand what was in there. Okay. All right. Now, and again, just stop me if there's a question that I can't answer. No, if you have a question. All right. So there are, again, I'm skipping over some details here that some of you, if you've done programming before, may know, but I'm going to focus on the three basic variable types. So you have strings, and these are basically variables that you use for words or letters, like my name or my email. You have numbers, which you use for counting or mathematical calculations, like 42 or 10,000 or 3.14. And then you have what are called Booleans, which you use for conditional logic. And I'll show you that in a second. And a Boolean can be either true or false. Okay? So let me give you an example of strings in action. So I'll just pull up. Someone put something on chat. Oh, okay, yeah. Right, so here we go. So let me this time I'm just going to kind of paste code around. So let's paste this in here. So here's an example. Maybe I increase the size here, that helps a bit. So here's some examples of strings. So I can give this string this variable first name a value, like my name. And with a string, you have this magic property called length. So let me just quickly copy those. Well, no, it's all right. So with this thing, what we're doing is say, give me the length of the string. Anyone tell me what's going to happen here? What's it going to show?
It will
Correct.
show you.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, we can also use chat for these things. That's also good. All right, so with the dot length, you can get the length of a string. Here I'm making another variable, my surname, and here to show you something called string concatenation. And with string concatenation, you can join together multiple variables into a single string. So what do you think is going to come out here? What's it going to say on that line? Exactly, Eleanor. Yep. So here what you're doing is you're saying basically we've got this little bit of a string here. We add to it the first name, we add a space character here, and we add the last name. And in this context, when you have string variables, the plus character becomes what's called the concatenation operator. Okay, so with that you can join strings together. And you also have methods in strings. So for example, you have this method called includes. And what that's saying is if the full name, does the full name include Harry? Okay, so let's run this quickly and see what we get from running that function. Okay. So sometimes this thing is a bit slow on the logging, right? So that was giving that output. Oh, here we go. So yep, Mr. Harry Fuchs, and it says true, which is a Boolean variable. So this thing said, does the string contain Harry? But let's say if we change this to Charles, run it again. And yeah, recently I've been having this problem that the log output is a bit slow being displayed, which is unfortunate. Okay, and now it says false because this string does not contain Charles. Okay, so maybe let me just paste all of that in here so you've got it for reference. And I just want to show you this page. So in the Mozilla developer reference, they have this whole page about strings, and it will tell you a lot more than I've told you today. And if you scroll down, you have some of the methods that you can call on a string, like char code at the string.prototype part you can ignore, but the after the second dot. So here's our includes function that I was just using, and they give you an example here. So the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. If the sentence contains the word fox, then it's gonna log that in this example. Okay, so you can explore that reference on what you can do with strings, and maybe later on in this course we can dig like there are a bunch of things like being able to do stuff like validate an email address. These are all types of things that can be useful to do with strings. Yeah. All right. So far so good. Any questions on this part so far? How's the speed going? Anyone? I mean, and remember, I just need to show something. Just remember, there are no stupid questions, only stupid people. No, only stupid answers. So yeah, if you're struggling, or if you're confused, maybe other people are confused. So please do let me know. All right, so that was strings. Let's have a look now at how numbers can be used. So I'm going to show you a little bit here. Let's go back to the code editor. And I got another function I can paste in. All right, so again, I declare a variable here and give it the value 10. And here's some things you can do with numbers. So I can take this variable name length and add it to itself +1, basically. So what's this going to say? 11. Yeah, exactly. Now there's a shorthand for doing this thing, which is to just say name length plus plus, and that's a shorthand for just adding 1 to a number. So this would, so what would you get here? Correct, 12. Because actually now it was 11 at this point, and now it's 12. And then, of course, as you can go plus plus, you can also go minus to go down again. So who's keeping count? Testing everyone's awake here. Excellent. We got at least some people awake. Okay. And you can also do mathematical operations, like the asterisk means multiply by, and the slash means divide by. So here I'm making a new variable called double name length, and I'm multiplying the current value of name length by 2. And here I'm taking name length again and dividing by 2. So you can do basic mathematical operations with this stuff. So let's just run this quickly. And hopefully the logs, when we get there, will confirm what you've said. The suspense is amazing. Oh, there you go. So it went to 11 to 12, back down to 11. 11 times 2 is 22, of course, and 11 divided by 2 is 5.5.
But why does it divide 11 at the last step and not 22?
Because you see which variable name I used. So I didn't take that one and divide by 2. I took this one and divided by 2. Maybe I can.
Yeah, I see it now.
If I'd done this, then you would have got back to 11, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's basic stuff you can do with numbers. You can, of course, do super complicated things. Again, I'm not going to go into all of that today, but you can see that you can do basic arithmetic, and that's useful, like if you're needing to count through the rows in a spreadsheet and this kind of stuff. Okay. So let's put that in here as well. Oh, slightly too big, whatever. I need to increase the size of the box. All right. So we're so far so good on strings. So we've done strings, we've done numbers, we've done variables. All right. So everyone's still with me so far. Let's go for some conditional logic. Now, a big part of a computer program is its ability to take decisions. And computers are pure logic. So they don't have, computer programs don't have emotions, they don't get sad, they purely deal in logic. And so the slides you're talking about, if the slides have been shared, sorry, I'm just seeing the message. Yeah, Lucas, I'll share the slides via Slack at the end. Okay. All right, so let's just zoom in on this. So this is a so-called flow diagram, and if we say, let's take a user and we say, does this user have an email address? Yes. Okay. Are we allowed to send to that email address? Yes. Then let's send an email. If they don't have an email address, we don't send an email. Or if we come down here and we're not allowed to send, maybe they said they don't want to receive emails, and we don't send the email. Okay, so, and in terms of conditional logic in a computer program, you have these things if and else. And here we're seeing the Boolean values at work. So here we've got a variable called user has email address, and we give it the value true. Yes, that means yes, they have an email address. We have another variable, email allowed, and we set that to false. So what's going to happen here, we go down here and it says if the user has an email address. Yep, that's true. So we go down to this if statement. Is email allowed? Well, that's false. So we can't go in here. So instead we jump into here where it says else don't send the email. And also if this was false, if the user didn't have an email address, we would have jumped right down to here. So this if else construct here in code represents this diagram in effect. Okay? Does that make some level of sense so far? So, and you can see maybe a key thing on the syntax here. Basically what you have is you'll say if you have an opening parenthesis, you have some condition here. This is very simple, but you can do other things. I'll show you some more in a minute. And then you have this opening curly brackets, which that one pairs with this one down here. This one pairs with that one there, and this one pairs with that one there. So that's the basic syntax of this kind of logic. And if you get the syntax wrong, some of you may have already run into syntax errors. When you try and save the code, the Google script editor will complain to you that there's some kind of syntax error and tell you which line number that was on. All right, still with me?
Yeah, in fact, just one question.
Yes.
I find it very confusing to find out exactly how the nest looks like, or how, which one belongs to what.
Mm-hmm.
And is there no best practice of how you can write it, or to make it a little bit easier to view what belongs to what?
So that was, I'll jump us a few slides forward. In fact, let me just move that thing. So it's a very good point. So if, basically, I would argue that, in fact, let's say never have more than 2 layers, and never do something like this, because it makes it incredibly hard to read. It's very, as you can already see, Frank, you're completely right. I mean, already this is getting hard to read. And so what you can do is use a function instead. So you can, and we'll come to functions in a minute, but they basically allow you to break your program up into small pieces. And so ideally, this thing should become some function. And inside that function, you might do another level of if-else nesting, but it allows you to have it in small chunks so that you can just focus on one piece of the logic at a time. We'll look at that a bit more in a little bit. Okay. All right. So let me just go a little bit further on the conditional logic, because so far we just used a Boolean value in here for this if condition. Here, there's quite a few different. You can also do comparisons. So here's a table of all the different comparisons. Let's not get overwhelmed by that right now. But we say, look, the number of, if we have a variable, a number called email sent, with this logic, we're saying if email sent is equal to 0, so 2 equal signs in most programming language means equal to, unlike when maths that you're taught at school where a single equal sign. So it says if email sent is equal to 0, send the first email. So if we haven't sent any emails, let's send our first email. If the email sent is, so here I've introduced something new, else if. So we got if, or we can say else if the number of emails sent is less than or equal to 5, then we'll send a reminder email. And the final thing is, otherwise, it must be like using Holmesian type logic, Sherlock Holmes. if assuming that email sent is on a minus number, anything that falls through to here meant that email sent was more than 5. So here we stop sending emails, whatever that means. Okay, so inside these brackets, you can make comparisons of different sorts. And here you've got a table of all the different comparisons you can make. So you can have equal to, don't worry too much about this one or this one and type. You have not equal to, you have greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. Okay, this is probably about as in-depth as this class is going to get today. So if you are really really overwhelmed by the logic, like, I don't know, you had bad experiences at school while they were teaching some of the stuff about Boolean logic, what I can highly recommend is an app called Lightbot. It's a game, but it's actually a way to teach programming. So I'll put that on the Slack channel. This is a perfect excuse to play games on your phone during this period of lockdown. And what this game teaches is the kind of logical thinking that goes into computer programming. So if you're fundamentally struggling, try Lightbot, and that may help you. Okay. So these two things. So we've got conditional logic, and within the logic, you can make comparisons. All so far so good?
What I don't get is the result, is true or false. Why is equal to result true and greater than result is false in this table?
So this line here, for example, is that the one you're referring to, Alina?
Yes, for example.
Okay, so all right, let me see if I can demonstrate that to you in terms of code and how that would look. So in fact, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to put this in. We can create a new script file, and we'll call it conditional. All right, so let's call this comparisons. Right. So one thing you can do is you can simply do something like this. So if we say 1 is greater than 2, what do you think, Eleanor, is going to come out of that?
False.
Correct, yeah. And so if I run this, it's super slow again, unfortunately. Sorry about this. Eventually, it will say false though. And so that's what this line is saying.
Okay.
So, and now this table makes it a bit unclear. You don't normally write code that looks like this. Normally, there you go, that's the false. Normally, you would do something like this. You'd say if, well, you'd have two variables. Like you have var x is 1 and var y is 2, or and then you say like if x is greater than y, you do something else. Do another thing. And normally these variables would be set by, for example, you might be counting the rows in a spreadsheet, like how many rows you have, or like it might be something like this, like number of emails you've sent to someone and then you have max emails. So if we say max emails is 5, in this case, we can keep sending. But once we get to actually, it should be that way around. Sorry. So if X is less than Y, so if number of emails sent is less than the maximum allowed number of emails, we can keep sending. Otherwise, we have to stop sending emails. So that's kind of how you use these comparisons. And this table I put in here is kind of a truth table, like we used to have in school. So you've got the different types of comparison. The not one is a nice way to test for false, yeah, we were looking at strings earlier, so we say var. Let's make a thing called a variable called subject. This is a test. If subject dot includes test, let's say. I found it. I didn't find it. Okay. And if I run that, then it should find it. And it's still thinking. Yeah. Okay, so, and if I was to change that to testing, it's going to reload. Well, let's make it something very clear, like apples. Okay, oops, I need to run the program. And now it's having a think. Again. So, yeah. So that's kind of an example. Because this function includes, returns a Boolean value, a true or false, if it was able to find that thing in this thing, that's like a more realistic example of how you use conditional logic. Okay, have I lost everyone, or are you still kind of with me?
Still here.
Okay, cool. Yep. I had some more examples, which I'll just paste in and then quickly walk you through. Oops. In fact, this one we could run. So in here, what we're doing is we're going to get an email and this value email allowed from the spreadsheet. So B9 is that one, email allowed is that one. So it's Martina. And Martina, because she works in marketing, is very happy to receive emails. And checking Martin is still there. And so it says it's sending to an email to her. So it got her email from the spreadsheet. It got the value of the other column. Oops, sorry. And then here it tests email allowed. Now there I'm using a bit of a trick. I could be more explicit. So I could say if email allowed is equal to yes, then it's going to send it. Otherwise, it must be equal to something else, like no. And then we give you one more example. So I'll paste in another chunk of code. Right, so this thing, again, we get Martina's email, Martina's, whether we're allowed to send emails, and we get the number sent. And so that should be like this. And then we're basically saying if we haven't sent any email address, any emails to her, she has 0 right now. Then we send the first email. That was the logic I showed you before. Or if it's still less than 5, we can send a reminder email, and then otherwise we say we've sent too many emails. All right, so that's a crash dive into how conditional logic works. I'll just paste these into here so you have it all and can look at it after the lesson if you need to. All right, how are people's brains doing at the moment? Still awake? It's afternoon. We still got some oxygen there that we can fill with code. All right, great. So next up, we're going to introduce, okay, coffee, you're almost there. In 15 minutes, we're going to have the coffee. Right now, we're going to show you something a bit more conceptual. So there's another type of variable called arrays. Now, the way to think about an array is it's like a deck of cards. Conceptual coffee, exactly. So, and just like a deck of cards, arrays have a way to have a list of things in a single variable. So this could be a variable, let's say, called list of emails. And you have an array has a bottom and a top. Each value in the array, so an array is a bit like a super box. It's a very large box you can put extra values in. Each value in the array has what's called an index. So the value at the bottom of the array has the index 0 and it goes up to 4. And then you have these operations you can do. So you can push values onto the array, or you can pop values off. That's like putting a card. Push is like you put a card on top of the deck. Pop is like you take a card off. And then you have these shifty moves that people that are dodgy dealers do. You can shift a card off the bottom of the deck, or you can put a card at the bottom of the deck. This is called shifting or unshifting. Okay, does this kind of look clear? So you've got this list of emails in an array. Okay, so we can come back to that in a second. Let me give you now an example of how that actually works. And I've now, excuse me 1 second, full screen. All right, so we're in here. Let's create a new file. Let's call it arrays and paste in this code here. All right, so here's how you declare an array variable. You have these square brackets like this, and you have commas. So here we've got an array with 3 values in it, and each one is separated by a comma, and we start with this opening square brackets, and we have the closing square bracket. So, and when we run that in a second, let me run that now so that as this keeps taking quite a while each time. All right, so that's running. So there we've declared an array. Here we're pushing a value onto the top of an array. So that's that was this operation. So we're pushing John onto the top of the array. Here we're unshifting, that's pushing a value on at the bottom of the array. And then also, two last things is we can access a single value from the array by using its index. So that was these numbers down here. Okay, so this one is going to give you the second element of the array. Right, so let's just look at the output of this first before I carry on waffling away. So here we had the array to start with, and you can see the way it logs it pretty much looks similar to how we declared it. And then we pushed John on. So John appears here on the right, because this is basically it reads from left to right. So the bottom of the array appears on the left and the top of the array is on the right. Then we unshifted Lucia under the deck. So she's now at the start of the array. John is here still at the end. Then we access the first index, and after we'd shifted Lucia there, it becomes Mary. So that's what we see there. And we see that the array length is 5. And that's because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 values in the array. So that's the basics of how an array works. Okay, and yeah. Heads exploding, or you kind of with this?
Still okay.
So, all right. So one important thing to note with arrays is arrays are what are called zero indexed. That means when you access elements of an array, the counting always starts with 0. Now, this can be a little bit tricky when you're working with Google Sheets, because Sheets always start with row number 1. And so if you're using things like insert row after, you've just got to make sure that you're using the right array index. Okay? Now, right now that's very abstract and conceptual. It will make a lot more sense in a second when I introduce, for loops. So with a for loop, we already all saw this in the first class. So for loops are a way to do things like loop through an array of emails. So now hopefully that starts to make more sense. So we've got this array with these emails, and with a for loop, I can basically step through one by one and go through the values. So what this thing is saying with a for loop is it's saying I'm going to make a variable I. And now I told you before you should use nice variable names. For loops are one of the few exceptions. It's like a convention that people use I, J, K if they need to. Usually you start with I. So you're saying this variable I starts with the value 0 and can be and is allowed to go this loop continues so long as I is less than the length of the array of emails, and then we're stepping forward by 1. So what this thing is actually saying is we're going to start at 0 and we're going to log each value of the array. So it's going to go to this one first, and then to that one, then to that one, then to that one, then to that one. So it's looping through like that. Here is another example where instead of starting from 0, I start from the end of the array and go backwards. So what we do is we say this variable j should start as the length of the array minus 1, because arrays always start with 0, not 1. And then so long as j is less than or equal to 0, we're allowed to keep going, and we increment backwards. So what this thing is doing then is go from here to here, to here, to here, to here. Okay, and for loops are things you'd use quite a lot. So it's worth playing around with this if you take a bit of time to get into this. Try your own experiments with for loops. All right, so let me give you a quick example of that. Make a new script in here, and let me pull out my example. So I'm going to actually reuse the example I used in the first class. Why is it? Give me 1 second. There we go. All right. So here what I'm doing is, you remember this from the first lesson, we got the active spreadsheet. We got all the data out of the spreadsheet. Then we shift. So shift, if as I showed you, was you take a value off the bottom of the stack. Now that corresponds to the column headings in the spreadsheet. So, and then what we do is we loop through all the values and log them. So let me just run this and you can see what it does. And so we're using a for loop to loop through the data. And here, this thing is getting even a bit trickier. So we use this counting variable to see which row in the data we have. But the second index here is the column number. So that corresponds to this and this column. All right, so let's see what that looked like. So it pulled out everyone's name and email address. So that's 0 and 1. So let me just explain that all again. The simple version is we sucked all of the data out of the spreadsheet. Then we removed the column headings. Then we looped through the rest of the data like this. So we went through it like this, row by row, and we basically pulled out each of these two values. And that's all this code does. And what you get is at the end, it logs each row. Okay, that's a for loop. All right, last bit, and then you get your coffees. All right, I'll paste that in there. Well, two last bits. So we got objects. Now, objects are kind of like, they're another variable type that allows you to put multiple values in a thing. The way to think about objects is to think about them like the telephone book. So what you can do is you can put what are so-called key value pairs. So the key is the thing you look up. So you look for someone's name, and then the value could be the phone number. In this case, I've got a directory of emails, and we say, okay, we're going to use people's names as the key and the value there. So when I do this, it says, show me from the emails the email address of Mary. So it looks in here, it goes down, okay, I've got Mary, all right, that's her email address. Okay, so those are objects. FYI, if you know other programming languages, these are sometimes called hashes or dictionaries. Yeah, this one right now, don't get too freaked out, because if you want to freak out, you need to freak out now with the last part, which are functions. All right, so functions are used to keep code simple, and they allow you to reuse parts of your code, a bit like Lego. So I'm showing you the main parts of, here's a function called should send, and its name is should send. It takes two parameters, and does something in here, and then it returns values. So it returns either true or false. So we're saying, should you send? If the number of emails is sent is more than 5, yeah, don't send. If the day of the week is a Saturday or a Sunday, don't send. Otherwise, you can send. And then when you call a function, it's called the function call. So here I'm calling that function by name, and I'm giving it 2 arguments. So when you call a function, they're called arguments. When you declare a function, they're called parameters. And what we're doing is we're passing it a number of emails sent for and a day of the week. And then we say if this returns true, which it will in this case, because for the email sent is less than 5 and the day of week is Wednesday, so we fall through to here, we're allowed to send the function. So by putting this bit of logic in this should send function, we put it in a place that it can be reused. And it's easier to, when you're writing code, to test like a small function rather than having a giant block of conditional logic. Yeah, and what did I do? And what I can do now is, just as an example, you've already seen this for loop, but I can, yeah. So I can call a function like this, and just say I want to call my for loop function. And what that's going to do is just call that. What I could also do is create a simple function like say hello. And we could just do something like this. And then I do say hello Charles, for example. And so here, okay, I got to rerun that. Here where we're calling the function, I'm passing it the argument Charles, and then in my say hello function, I'm taking that as a parameter and using it. And then I could say we can add another example like add to numbers. This is kind of silly, but it's a quick example for the sake of this. So, and then I return x plus y. Normally you wouldn't do that, but just to show you how this works, I can add to numbers 3 and 4. So that should give the number 7. Yeah, so those are functions. Right, we've hit 5 o'clock. I'm guessing people want their coffee or whatever you're going to do now. All right, that was pretty intense. It was a crash course. And maybe seeing how fast we went through this, I'm thinking maybe we need to review some of this in the next lesson. Maybe we'll change the direction a little bit and spend some of the next lesson on going over what we learned today. But here's the challenge for this time. Right, so you create a script that pretends to send an email to the rest of the class using the spreadsheet. And you don't send if the email allowed column is set to no. So that's this one. So where that's set to no, you don't send. Where you say pretends to send, you can just log instead of sending the email. And don't send if the number of emails sent column is more than 5. And you get, okay, and then I created this other tab called delete me. And here you've got some bonus points. So if you can loop through the values in the sheet delete me and log all of the even numbers, and then I'm giving you, there's something I've just introduced here, is called the modulo operator. So when you divide a number, like with this operator, so 4 divided by 2 is 0, 5 divided by 2 is 1. That's the remainder of the division. And then huge bonus points if you can delete all the rows containing an even number. And I've given you a couple of tips there. There's this delete row method, and you need to think backwards. That's just a little clue. Okay. Yeah, no problem. Thanks for everyone for coming. I'll share the stuff after. And yeah, we'll look at the feedback. I'll send out a feedback form and tell me if you're having any problems with this. Maybe we can also schedule some one-on-one sessions and go through it a bit slower.
Thank you.
But in principle, you're now all dangerous with JavaScript. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Harry.
Thank
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Harry. Bye-bye. Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening.
Bye,
Thanks.
good evening.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Harry.
Bye.
Ciao.
Thank you.